My name is Larassa Kabel, and I'm here today to work with the Avenues, who has graciously commissioned me to do their first piece of permanent public art. And I just wanted to start at the top and say thank you to the Avenues, all the businesses that supported the funding for this, the NEA, the Iowa Arts Council, and Bravo, who also contributed money so that Black Crown of Recurring Loss could be produced. And Moberg Gallery, which represents me and was instrumental in giving me this commission. So yeah, I was approached about doing this probably 4 years ago, and I was very excited about the prospect. Now, people that are familiar with my art probably think of me as doing a lot more drawings and paintings. Frequently I'm doing very large works on paper and that nobody's supposed to touch, and nothing is supposed to be around it. So the idea of doing something that was out in public, that people were going to interact with, that was kind of uncontrolled, was a really interesting problem to get. My work generally focuses on doing works about the things that I think people have the hardest time talking about: love, sex, death, and power. And when I was approached about doing this, I immediately thought about how when I do those works, oftentimes I'll substitute animals for people in order to draw people in instead of repel them. So about 10 years ago, I had done a series of drawings of dead fawns that were a way of talking about my realization after becoming a mother that I had exposed myself to the most profound vulnerability of loss that I could ever imagine, which is something that people before you're a parent tell you, but you don't really appreciate it until you actually have a child and you realize how much your heart is on the line if you were to lose them. So, excuse me. So I'd done this series of drawings of dead fawns called the Hazards of Love. That was kind of one of these using death, using animals as representation for the death, to draw people in because they were really beautiful, and then have them focus on what was really happening, that these were past animals. So when Moberg approached me about doing this project, I immediately thought back about how I had also seen this very compelling piece of art down at the Manil in Houston. And again, it ties in with deer for me. It was a very tiny Bronze Age sculpture from Iran that was a two-headed stag. And it was the most simple, tiny little sculpture. They didn't have any documentation about it except where it came from and how old it was. But it was so compelling because it was this little bronze statue. It was a stick figure, and yet this little two-headed push-me-pull-you was obviously a red stag. You could tell by the antlers. It was very beautifully done in a time when it's really hard to make anything out of bronze. So I was really compelled by that figure, and I had drawn a sketch of it, and it just stuck with me for years and years. And so when Moberg asked, you know, is there something that you could see yourself doing for an outdoor sculpture? I was like, yes, I've got this thing that I cannot let go of. It's this little sculpture of these two-headed stags. And to me, what that represented was it tied in with the way that I've used deer as this platform for a pure sort of love. It doesn't have any politicization to it. It's something that's really beautiful. It's really pure. And so when I thought about this two-headed form, one of the other aspects of it that I had been thinking about is how when you have a profound love, it is always shadowed and paired with the absolute terror of losing that love. And so a lot of times what we do is we cling even tighter to it. We're afraid to lose the thing that we will eventually lose. Everything goes away. And a lot of the work that I do about loss and death has to do with paying attention to our mortality, because that makes us more aware of what we have at the time that we have it. It makes us appreciate our lives. It makes us appreciate our loves. And it keeps us from fighting about small, trivial things. I am a big proponent of letting that stuff go, because I know that every relationship is so fragile and so temporary. So for the sculpture, the idea of it was that one of the deer is love. The other head represents loss. So when you look at these, this side is love, and this side, where the ears are tipped down, is actually modeled after a photograph of a hunter that had shot a fallow deer. And so he had just shot the deer. He's holding up the head. He's very proud of it. It's a beautiful deer. And you wouldn't know the deer was dead, except for the fact that the ears have been relaxed. It's so freshly dead that it still looks alive, but it has no muscle tension, and he's holding it up. And that's why the ears are tipped down. The other aspect to this that was interesting, so thinking about, this is a piece of public art. It's out where anybody can touch it, they can climb on it. I had to make some decisions about how to make this a safe thing for people to interact with. So initially my thoughts, because the original little piece of sculpture that I had seen was of red stags, which are beautiful, love their antlers. I initially was going to do a larger sculpture with these red stag antlers that intercross in the back to show that entanglement of love and fear. But they're pointy. And so I was very concerned that I know people are going to get on it. They probably have already been on it. My studio space is down by the sculpture garden. I watch people climb on pieces of public art all the time. And so I was very concerned about the safety risks with it. And so I had to drop the red stags because their antlers are just too aggressive to have out unguarded. So going through and thinking about like what antlers are sculptural and beautiful and safe, I ended up coming up with fallow deer. So the thing that's interesting about fallow deer is that they are I think they're one of the most beautiful deer. They're not particularly large, but they're on every continent. They are made to be, basically they're put into parks for people to go hunt them because they're so beautiful. They have these very large antlers. They come in every color range from cream to black with these beautiful spots on them, and people love them. And they love them so much that they want to kill them and hold them on forever. And I think that also is an interesting point of like, what is that passion, what does that love mean when you just can't let it go, that you're willing to kill the animal in order to keep it and keep it the way you want it to be. So that's why the antlers are the way that they are. That's the deer that I ended up choosing to put out here. And in thinking about it as public art, the other aspect to this that I was really interested in is the fact that it will be interacted with, and that should be part of what the piece is. And so I have spent a lot of time going to the Field Museum in Chicago, and up on the gallery they have portrait busts of people from around the world. And if you walk around and look at them, you'll see like the noses are shiny, every part that people want to touch, the breasts, everybody touches them, and it's wiped the finish off. And so what happens over time is you see like the evidence of people connecting with the art. Now, it's not what was intended, but I think there's kind of a beauty to that wear and tear that says like these are ages and ages of people interacting with this piece, becoming associated with it, tearing it down slowly because nothing lasts. So the finish on this is very dark on purpose, and that's why it's called Black Crown, is that the anticipation that over time, as people come out and touch it, kids crawl on it, people put things on it, whatever happens to it, that's part of it being a piece of public art, that it's anticipating that dynamic, and so it's not so precious. Also, the other aspect to this is that it's placed on a piece of limestone from Iowa, and specifically from a friend of mine's place. But I wanted to also talk about that history, because the location of the statue is on this kind of historic site in Des Moines where there had been this really beautiful mansion, and now it's been replaced by a housing development for low-income housing. But it itself is like a historic place, and I'm thinking about like all the layers of what this piece of land has seen. All of this was underwater. For millions of years this was underwater, and then this is what happened to that. And so I love the idea of like layering of history, that hopefully the statue will be here for a long time, and that it's just adding on to those layers. And I think last, the thing that I have to say about this is that, and I'm not going to tell you what they are, but am I okay with time? Okay. There are a couple of Easter eggs hidden into the sculpture. And so if people get in and pay attention, they will find a few things that are hidden in it that I hope that they enjoy finding. So one of them is a little tribute to my favorite dog, Beans, who died. So it's kind of a little memorial to him, and then there's some other little bits. So I hope that you enjoy it.